Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Rad Life. First and foremost, I want to just thank everybody who has been very supportive with the show for the last 10 plus years. And lately, since the summer, if you have checked out the radlife.com and supported the magazine and the media platform, it's really been exciting to take what we started 11 years ago with the show and take it to another level, adding more resources and content for people. Today, I am really thrilled to welcome Derek Gehl on the show. Derek and I met last year for the first time in Santa Fe at the Modern Elder Academy, where he is currently CEO. I think, Derek, correct? And I think that's it, right? You were just coming in, or you had just come on board.
Well, yeah, it had just really stepped into the CEO role there, and the adventure had begun.
So Derek, shows up at Santa Fe, and I'm already bugging him, and I've been bugging him for the whole year. So no, but it was a really great conversation. Sometimes alignment is really serendipitous, and that I think I felt that happen on many
Mhm.
levels during that 1 week in Santa Fe. And if you're not familiar with Modern Elder Academy, you will be after the show for sure, and we'll delve into a little bit of background of why Derek is doing it, but also go check out Modern Elder Academy on the website. And I believe the website is MEA Wisdom, correct, Derek?
Yeah, that's correct. MEA wisdom.
MEAwisdom.com.
Yeah.
So it's the promise is already there, right there in the URL. You will be wiser for having visited it. So please do that. And a shout out to the original man behind the vision, Chip Connolly, who basically did that. Love to basically arrange for Chip to be on at some point, but great group of people doing very important work as far as I'm concerned, and you will probably agree with me after we're done with this. Lately, um, and it started with me like it's always been part of it, but it got really intensified last year. But lately, I've also been thinking a lot about like what it actually means to grow up. And ironically, the workshop that I went to was actually titled um, "Reboot" and the art of growing up. And I remember, and it was put on by Jerry Colonna, who has been on the show. And I told Jerry, I think when he was on the show, I said, I kind of signed up for this thing within 2 days of it starting, got on a plane, went to Santa Fe, and I was still confused about what grown up was. Were you referring to growing up your business, growing up as a human being, growing up as in like into adulthood? But I've really been thinking lately about this, and it's an ongoing thing. Like, what does it really mean to grow up? Not in age necessarily, but in wisdom. Again, right? Presence and agency.
Mm.
And we use some of these words like sovereign and grounded and all this stuff. And I think we live them more and more the more we delve into them. But we live in a culture that celebrates youth and speed, but offers very little guidance for the middle chapters of life, right? And the ones where things fall apart, maybe sometimes, maybe we question what next. We come back together even within ourselves, like maybe reconnect with our identity that we kind of got busy with, and it tends to ask us to lead differently. It tends to ask us to maybe live differently, to question whether this is what we want or whether there's more, right? And so today's guest like is helping rewrite the story with Modern Elder Academy and the great folks that are involved in it. I've been to a couple of workshops. Derek, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time, my friend, to do this, and it's super fun for me to have you.
Yeah, rad. I'm super happy to be here and looking forward to this.
So let's talk. Let's talk a little bit because for me, i- we use the term midlife, right? We use
Mhm.
the term modern elder, but
Mhm.
it really is like I'll go back to my cohort that was there. We had people that were in like there's a guy that was in his 30s.
Yeah.
There was a guy that was in his 70s. We had everything from a person who was having sort of a professional crisis of identity to a person who literally lost a child, an adult child, and basically was really questioning everything. So it's not really about slowing down. It's not even really age related at all. I kind of started
Mhm.
with this thing being kind of Gen X focused, but I realized that
Mhm.
it's really transcends beyond generations. At certain points in our life, we have these moments of existential, like, what now?
Mhm.
What is this enough? Is there more? And we start to question, and usually and you and I talked off the air a little bit, like with guys, it's even a little bit more difficult than women. They tend to have kind of a little more support tribe. But where do I go for that? Where do I find the guidance? Where do I feel safe enough to explore, right? And
Mhm.
kind of grow, whatever that means individually for me. So let's talk a little bit about modern elder, and it's just
Sure.
like, what is your story like? How did you get involved in this?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So it's funny. I mean, this goes back to mid 2023, and I think so. I mean, let's talk about midlife for a second. Midlife, and even the word elder, right? Like
Yeah.
elder is one of those words that sometimes, honestly, Rad, I wish we could take it out of our name. And the reason why is a lot of people have a real visceral reaction to it and go, I'm not old. And, the term elder is something that has lost its shine, I guess, in the modern world. I mean, an elder is somebody that holds wisdom, somebody that's revered, et cetera, in society. And you go back to historical cultures and stuff like that. And the term midlife in particular is actually, you're right. You and I are both Gen X, right? So we look at it and go, yeah, we're Gen X,
Right.
okay? We're in midlife, but depending on the source you look at, it can range anywhere from 35 to 75, right? Like
Yep.
it's the middle of our lives, right?
Yep.
And and it's such a crazy time that nobody's really given us any guidance around.
Well, we're Gen X, Derek. Nobody gave us a
No,
roadmap,
nobody ever
right?
did.
Like, here,
That's
go
right.
figure go
Latchkey
figure it
kids.
out, and by the way, here's a key you can put around your neck. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true for Gen X, right? So there isn't really any guidance though. I mean, you look at adolescence, I mean, you typically go through adolescence in a cohort, right?
You're right.
I mean, you go through school, you go through these sort of measurable things together, you're
Yep.
working through it together. There's infrastructure that's built around supporting youth, stuff like that. And
Yep.
even seniors, right? We've recognized seniors. And these are all age groups and that didn't used to exist, but we've recognized those. And we're starting to recognize midlife as being this time of massive transformation. And it
Yep.
looks a little bit different for everybody, whether, depending on socioeconomic background, depending on gender. I mean, a woman's experience through midlife with menopause and stuff like that looks very different than a man's experience, right?
Right.
Um, and so, I'm going to give kudos to Chip, the founder of MEA, for seeing this after he kind of went through his own, let's call it midlife crisis,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which he's kind of rebranded to the term midlife chrysalis, which I like a lot better. And he recognized as he started to research, and this is one of the interesting things about Chip, is when he doesn't necessarily understand something,
Mhm.
he researches it, he goes so deep into it to the point that, he learns how to, and then he writes a book about it, right? And he's just one of those guys. And he went down that rabbit hole and started working with academia, working with researchers, social scientists to better understand this thing called midlife. And he was a bit of a pioneer in that and saw this
Sure.
need for a
Absolutely.
place for us to go in midlife and go, how do we navigate this, right?
Yeah.
And we're starting to see a lot more press on this, a lot more resource on this. Even academia is waking up to this right now. You look at Stanford, Harvard, the Ivy Leagues, they're all launching programs for people in midlife
Right.
as well, for a place for us to go and help us figure out our transitions, figure out all of these things that we go through in midlife.
Mhm.
And I mean, the list of transitions, whether it's empty nesting, career change, retirement, blah blah blah, it just goes on and on. Big life changes, and my personal story is funny. I mean, MEA kind of found me,
Oh,
and
tell me more.
it found me at a point in my life where I'd done the things, I'd done all the things I was told to do. I've
Mhm.
been an entrepreneur all my life, right? So early .com days, built companies, did all the things. I wore this, I'm an entrepreneur. That was my identity. And even if you
Yeah.
search me online now, like digital marketer, entrepreneur, blah blah blah, I've coached all these entrepreneurs and stuff like that. But then you get to, so I'm turning 49 here in a couple months, right? So I'm in the what they call the U curve of happiness, right? So you
Yeah.
get happiest starting your teens, and then it starts to decline and decline and decline, and it bottoms out 47, 48, and then happiness starts to go back up. That's kind of the U curve of happiness. So
Yeah.
MEA, I got a call, basically from somebody that was working at MEA that had been to one of my own events in
Mm.
Singapore back in 2017 and said, "Hey, we've got this thing. It's called a midlife wisdom school, started by this guy Chip Conley." And I went, "A midlife what?" Um, and and I was actually just at this point of exiting a business, and
Yeah.
I've been in numerous different businesses, but I grew a health supplements company since the mid 2000 teens, and left that industry a little bit disenchanted. And I was like, now what? And I think this is the case for so many
So many.
people.
Right.
We work our asses off, and
Right.
we're told, keep up with the Joneses, buy the house, have the children, work, 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 identity, achieve, 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 achieve. And then we get to this point in midlife, and we start to go, huh, this
Yeah,
maybe wasn't.
there's still an empty feeling, right? There's still
There
something
is. Yeah.
missing. It's not gelling like it's supposedly we were told it was gonna do. And it's interesting because I'm literally like tomorrow I will be 61, right?
Mhm.
So you and I are within the same generation.
Yeah.
And as to what we were
Different.
saying before, that it's not even age related or generational related. There's a difference between you and I of over 10 years, right?
Mhm.
So but yet we have a shared experience when it
Yeah.
comes to this thing our identity was based on our being entrepreneurs. We shared that, that your relationships basically were very much part of your identity. You touched on the fact that especially, when you're younger, you're sort of part of an identity group, whether it's school, whether it's family or whatever. And then
Mhm.
you kind of like branching out on your own and you're kind of doing your own family thing or whatever. But at some point, your personal identity is so wrapped up with all the stuff. And you see it happen with a lot of people that, I mean, it's an interesting thing for me. I think, to again give credit to Chip, I think curiosity is a huge part of why you and I are doing what you were doing and why Chip has basically been foundationally leading the way. We have a curiosity to explore, right? So
Yeah.
when you basically start looking at your identity and you go, well, but what's my identity? And I'm seeing this literally play out with people that are in the business of helping people sell their businesses, like exiting, right? And
Mhm.
they're consulting them all day long about how to exit a business, how to basically sell the business that they've been in maybe 20 plus years, but there's nothing being given within that process to they're transitioning not only out of a business but into a different identity when their identity was so closely tied to the
100%.
business, right? And so this is where that void is, where you guys are so instrumental and have been so much pioneers in this process. And again, since you and I talked, I know even from our initial conversation, it's an ongoing process of development, right? It grows, it flexes, it
Mm.
takes different directions. There's so many layers to this aging, solo aging, especially for our
Mm.
generation, is a big deal that other generations didn't even deal with. So
Mhm.
how do you do that, right? And it's
Yep.
very interesting that sometimes it's a moment of rupture, sometimes it's a moment of realization, sometimes it's a crisis of consciousness, sometimes it's existential, and sometimes it just could be simply as an empty feeling that, well, there's got to be more. This is not
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah, you're right. It totally manifests in different ways for everybody. But, the number one word I hear from people that come to MEA is they hit midlife and they feel stuck.
Mm,
I'm stuck.
yeah,
I'm doing this thing I've done all my life and I'm good at it. And typically it's not money related. They're like,
yeah, you're
I've
right.
made good money. I've done all the things,
Yep,
but I'm stuck. I don't know what to do now. I've lost purpose. I've lost desire. Is this all there is? And, if you think about, go back 30, even 40 years, okay, I'm 50. I could go, okay, I've got, another 10 years of work left and then, another 10 years of life left. Right.
yeah,
Like home stretch. But that's not the case anymore. I mean, our
no,
lifespan and health span, especially if you adjust for socioeconomic factors, is way longer. And at 50, I mean, we've got people that are coming to MEA that are still working, even some of our facilitators that are in
yeah,
their 80s and still going.
yeah,
And for me, I'm like, that's aspirational, right?
yeah, it
But
is.
if I'm 50, I'm like, damn it, I still got that's 30 more years. I want to do
That's a
something
third
that,
that's a third technically a third of your life.
yeah.
It's not yeah, and let's touch on that for a minute because you said a few things that I wanna just kinda, like, deal with from a
Mm,
from a sort of a cultural thing. You know, we talked about culture, right? You start saying about, like, culture and, like, there's a negativity associated with elder, right? Again, it
yeah.
depends, I think, where you come from and where you know, it's Western culture, is it Eastern culture, is it Middle Eastern culture? Sometimes it's interesting, but because depending on what culture you're from, and we, you know, we happen to live in a Western culture, the word elder has kind of become disenchanting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It almost represents slowing down, what have you, right? And
Mm,
yet, in cultures, especially when you know, and everybody in marketing talks about, you know, it's all about story now, right? Well, last time I looked, the original storytelling was done by elders around a campfire,
mhm,
right? Where the wisdom was passed on, whether it's through story or through example or through quest or you know, whatever it is, right? So elder is a word that's interesting because I wouldn't I don't have a problem with elder as much as honestly I have the problem with senior
or elderly.
or elderly, right?
Yeah.
But elder you used to, and still in my mind represents responsibility,
Yeah.
perspective, service, wisdom, and
Yeah.
that's how you used to translate it, right? And we're kind of doing it here during this what we're doing here. The other thing with culture that's really interesting, or verbiage that's really interesting, is people get stuck on the terminology, and so they shut off to the possibility,
Yeah.
right? And you and I are both entrepreneurs, and so marketing and branding and positioning is a big part of what we think, how we think. Sometimes it's the language we use that
Mhm,
basically really either continues to help us be stuck or actually unsticks us,
mhm.
right? And so I think it's interesting as we get to this point in life, which is now literally a third of our life, right? We're not. I mean, the government even raised the retirement age, right? So
Yeah.
it used
Yeah.
to be that by the time you got to be 65, you're basically, you know, and you're sitting on God's wait. You know, we were waiting for God's bus to come by, and you only got about 5 or 10 years ahead of you. And you know, so if you play golf, that'll cover most of the time. Now you're looking at it, and you're going. I mean, I'll give you my personal example. If I was to pass away at the age of my father, and
Mhm,
I know that I'm living, and you were in a health in you know, your supplement or health related business before, you we live differently.
mhm,
So I'm looking at, even if I last as long as my father did, I'm looking at 27 years from where I am today.
mhm,
Okay, what am I going to do? Play golf for 27 years? That's not going to work
mhm.
for me. Right? What is my purpose? What is my legacy? And legacy again is one of those interesting words because most people will look at legacy and go, well, that's what I leave behind.
Yeah.
Whereas legacy really is how you live your day to day.
Mhm,
And part of that then becomes the imparting of that wisdom, at least your perspective, you know, sharing from a position of vulnerability. And you touch on the fact that it's not money related anymore. It
mhm,
isn't. It's not monetary reward anymore that's driving us, because we've done that. We've crossed that off the list. You know, if you're comfortable enough, that's not to say that everybody's in that same position, right? Because you hear about baby boomers working later, but sometimes you're working later not because it is the financial reward or the necessity. You're working later because it's that purpose, it's that continuing
yeah.
growth, right?
Yeah, and you know, it's funny you talk about that word, two words, purpose and legacy. I
Yeah,
mean, those are two words that I think are misunderstood by a lot of people. You know, I mean, I see people come to our campus all the time, like, you know, I've retired or I'm looking for the next thing. I need a what's my big purpose, my big thing. And I think one of the things to reframe around purpose and also even reframe around legacy, it's not one big thing. It can be a series of little things. It can be the impact you have on your children. It can be the impact, the little things you do in your community that have
right.
meaning to you in micro purposes that
Yeah,
you do every day that have impact. It's the things that you leave behind. But I think, you know, again, it's Western culture. You know, we celebrate the big wins and the big things, and we ignore the little things that people
yeah,
do every day. And I think when we can reframe that as well, all of a sudden you go, "Oh my, there's purpose all around me. There's legacy in the humans I touch, in the change
Exactly.
I create." It doesn't have to be I started a foundation or a big company and I did all this and I cured world hunger, right? Like, um, and when you can reframe that, I think life in and of itself gets a lot more
Yeah,
fulfilling.
I think I may have shared this with you, but one of those moments where like something hit me like a ton of brick is, cult. We people are accustomed to saying, leaving things better than you found them, right?
Yeah.
And then somewhere along the way, I came across somebody who basically phrased it slightly differently and said, "It's leaving people better than you found them."
Mm, yeah.
It was such a slight shift, right? But
Yeah.
such a magnitude of impact difference.
Yeah.
So that to your
Yeah.
point, it's like that foundation, are you volunteering, for example, are you helping your neighbor? Are
Mhm.
you taking their trash cans in?
Mm.
The legacy is something, you're right. It's something that is a living thing that you can start tomorrow versus worried about what you're leaving behind, and that's your legacy. So I think we're both, I mean, do you agree with me that like what we're referring to as midlife, right? Is
Yep.
it's not really a crisis. It's actually an opportunity, and it's a point of initiation, and
Mhm.
dare I even say a great gift of reinvention or reconnecting with the
Yeah.
core parts of who you are.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a physiological transformation,
Hmm.
100%. I mean, if I don't know if you've read Arthur Brooks' book, Strength to Strength,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
But,
The
I
second
mean, he
method.
talks about, how in our 40s we move from fluid intelligence to crystallized intelligence. There's
Yeah,
biological changes that are happening as well, right?
yeah,
And so, how do we shift, our lives along with those biological changes that happen to both genders, right? I mean, women
mhm,
obviously have some bigger biological changes than men. We're more a gradual decline. They hit menopause, which is a bigger decline all at once,
right.
and they have to navigate that. But the bottom line is there's this physiological decline, but there's all these other things that are happening as well. I mean, perfect example for me. I mean, my youngest son is 17. He's off to university next year,
Mhm,
right? Like
mhm,
we're empty nesters. My wife and I have not had no kids in our house for 25 years, right?
mhm.
We're both like, wow. Like, fortunately, I'm happily married, and we're looking forward to this next chapter,
Yeah,
and we're like, great, this
right,
is going to be our next adventure. But a lot
right.
of people get here and go, oh, damn,
I
now
mean,
what?
the person I'm with, right? Like my whole identity was wrapped in the kids,
Hmm.
and now I'm like, who is this person? And it actually manifested itself quite a bit during COVID, right? I mean, that was highlighted during
Hmm.
COVID. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the other things you talked about there when you're talking about is it's the people you touch. It's not the things you do, it's the people you touch.
you're
I
right.
think that's probably one of my biggest realizations is I've been blessed to have sort of MEA. It's interesting. Like I found a role that has purpose, but is also giving me what I need at an interesting time in my life as I get to work
Yeah,
with all these incredible thought leaders and social scientists. But
right.
talking about people, I mean, we've been taught to achieve, 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 right? Like achieve, collect, achieve, get more stuff, buy the
10x
fancy
this,
thing.
do
Yeah,
that. Everything is a
exactly,
hustle. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and that's the measure of success and
yeah.
happiness, which is so far from reality. It's
Hmm.
people, it's communities, it's relationships.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest predictors of longevity, I mean, we look at the biohacking space and there's incredible advances in longevity medicine and precision medicine, and I love all of it. I've been a biohacker for a long time, but as you're spending thousands of dollars for the latest whatever injection, recognize that one of the biggest levers you can pull for longevity is actually community and
Yeah,
having strong.
investing in community.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the problem is, big companies can't monetize that very well, so it doesn't get the press that it needs,
Right,
right?
right.
You know? But when you think about happiness and stuff
Yeah.
like happiness is not, dying alone on your island with,
Right.
all your toys and not sharing them, right? Like
Right.
it's about connections to other humans and meaningful relationships in community. And
Yeah.
to an extent, I think that's where Western society has kind of shot ourselves in the foot, particularly with our aging population. You get to a certain age, and you send them off to a home, right?
Well,
If
we're also perpetuating this in the younger generation with the siloed
Mhm.
approach behind a monitor and everything, right? I mean, you and
Yeah.
I were elderly enough to basically remember when you
Mm.
basically went outside and you connected with people and you maybe
Yeah.
didn't there was a certain uncertainty of what you were going to do that afternoon or whatever. Like it wasn't there wasn't this this sort of we have sold a part of our autonomy and curiosity for the price of convenience,
Yeah.
and we are in a siloed mindset. And you and I never conducted business together, but I already know that basically you and I probably thrive in an environment of collaboration more than basically a top-down situation. That
Mhm.
there's that inspirational component that comes with trust and working in an environment where you're basically, you know, your leadership style is totally different than a top-down command and control, right?
Mhm.
And so all of that again is part of where all of a sudden you're in, I said, midlife, chrysalis, let's just say, and the word chrysalis alone, like if you look at it as a chrysalis, thank you, Chip, is it is now basically a transformational metamorphosis. If you
Mhm.
don't, then it's an overwhelming load that you don't even know how to even categorize,
Yeah.
let alone define, right? And so
Yeah.
from your experience being involved in this now, what do you feel that at this point, at this stage, what do people resist the most?
What do people resist the most?
What tends to break first? Is it identity, certainty? I mean, God, let's not even go down to the road of ego, right? But what tends to basically where's their resistance usually?
It's definitely identity, I think. If it really, I mean, one of our programs is literally called "Who Am I Now?" Right? Like,
Yeah.
um, and if I look across transitions, so we have a core program called Navigating Transitions, right? And
Hmm.
that's one of our core programs. We've trademarked the term transitional intelligence. We've done a bunch of work around that. And if I look across the transitions,
Yeah.
and what brings people there, it's a massive identity shift that they don't know how to navigate, whether that's, empty nest, right? You went from
Hmm.
being a parent and that's all you did, or I was an entrepreneur all my life, or I was a lawyer, I was a doctor, I was this, I was that. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, it's a complete paradigm change. And who am I without that? Who can I be without that? And so I would say that's probably one of the biggest ones that people get stuck in.
Yeah.
And then they feel alone. They think they're the only one going through this. Little do they know that this is a classic, well documented process that we help people through. Every single month, they're not alone, and it's pretty textbook. Um,
Would you think, Derek, that we're kind of touching on it a little bit, but I just
mm,
want to kind of call it out. Do you think what we're talking about in part is where you kind of move from ambition driven to a more meaning driven life? Or is it
yes, I
a
think that's
combination, but one leads the other, maybe more?
Yeah, I mean, it's ambition and it's achievement, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of the social construct we've set up in society
Yeah.
in the Western world, it is go to school, get an education. The better education you get, the better job you can get, and the more money you can earn, and the more you can acquire. And so we spend the first 40 to 50 years of our life on that treadmill of acquire, 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 keep up with the neighbors, keep up with the Joneses, only to hit the wall sometime in midlife and go, oh, damn, that's actually not the pathway to happiness. What is?
Right. And I'm not even open the door of the difference between happiness and joy, right? I'm not even going to
Oh,
go there because
yeah,
because
yeah.
that's just that in itself, if you really sit there and you really think about it and you start looking at definitions and you look at what gives you happiness, which is in a way somewhat fleeting, and what
Hmm.
gives you joy.
Yeah.
Happiness tends to be an external measure
Hmm.
or benchmark, and joy tends to be something that you have a lot more internal control about, and well, not control, but you have more internal capacity to integrate into your life. And so again, it's a shift of mindset, because if you're pursuing happiness, great, but then when it feels empty
Mhm.
and you're pursuing happiness again, versus if you're actually integrating joy into your life, you have a little bit more of a foundational thing that allows you to kind of weather these storms, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because, we're talking about this in a not a you're right, it's not a hypothetical. This is documented. This is happening
Science.
every day at MEA,
Totally.
right? Right. I mean, we're here, as personal examples of taking the sort of this journey. And add to that now that we are also living in an enormous period of disruption, socially,
Yeah.
economically, technology, right? Why is this, why it almost puts more of an emphasis on why this work is especially important right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, for the first time in history, what is it? Teenagers are declining happiness, and I mean, it's we've shot ourselves in the foot. We've let
Yeah,
technology set the agenda and tell us what happiness is, and I mean, really, social media is, it is damaging in a lot of
it is.
cases to the
Yeah,
point that I don't know. I heard Australia has banned it for
yeah,
social media for under 16, and
yeah.
I remember when my son turned 9, he went from this super confident kid to one day just having an anxiety disorder, which
Mhm.
as Gen Xers were like, nobody had anxiety when we were
Well,
kids.
nobody ever just diagnosed us with ADHD either, Derek.
Either, yeah, exactly. Um, but every third kid in his class is
Yeah.
diagnosed with anxiety. And I remember speaking to we went to a psychologist here in West Vancouver where I lived, and I said, she said to us, "We're going to look back in 20 years from now, as we gave our 10s and 12-year-olds, social media and cell phones like we were
Mhm.
basically giving them cigarettes."
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
went, "Yep, you're right."
I
But
mean,
when you
the
live in
results are already there if you really open your eyes. It's already there.
it
You
is,
can see
it
it.
is.
If you choose to look through that filter, you can see it. Similarly, which I found very ironic the other day, I was reading an article and it was talking about employment, right? I mean, you and I basically gained our learned our chops and learned our, we went through those entry level jobs, and that's how we learned our
Mhm.
social skills, our soft skills,
Yep,
our technical skills,
yep,
all that stuff, right? Well, those jobs are now being eliminated as far
yeah,
as an entry point. They're all becoming AI or robotics, right? So then
yep.
where do you basically cultivate, and I'm not seeing a alternative system being built into place to give that generation the ability to then become
Yeah,
skilled enough, elevated enough to be, to bring that value to the work environment or societal environment as a whole. And so the technology again is sort of working against us. So I found it very interesting when I read an article the other day that from an, we're right now in a no hire no fire kind of situation, as I hear.
mhm,
So I heard that basically when you look at the numbers from last year, the people that were being hired were people that were an average age of 42, and that
mhm.
there was a drop in the percentile of people like in the 25 range that were
Yeah,
being hired.
yeah,
And it didn't say it, but I kind of was looking at it and I go, well, even in the time of AI, when before, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, even, we were basically kicking out the person who was the senior because we were paying him too much in order to hire two people for one, right?
yeah.
And now with AI, because you need to get the prompts done with the experience and wisdom that you need to get them correct, and then you have to evaluate the output of, in a quality control way, all of a sudden that elder value has now basically been elevated.
Well, yeah, it's funny how this went full circle, right?
Right.
And I listened to it's part of our problem with this shareholder driven culture, the next earnings report, trying to
Yeah.
maximize, and it's a race. A good friend of mine's at a massive law firm, and yeah, they're using AI, and I'm like, well, okay, great, this is going to give you a better return today, but what happens in 10 years from now when you
Right.
haven't trained the next, set of associates? Um, and it's interesting, and I have zero data to back this up, but something I've observed, if I go back to before COVID, um, where I live here, eh, local businesses, so Starbucks and stuff like that,
Yeah.
restaurants, they couldn't hire enough. They couldn't find kids.
Right.
There was a million jobs. I mean, a kid working at Safeway could be like, "No, I'm done," and he
Right.
could go across the street and have a dirt job an hour later, right?
Right.
Huge demand.
Right.
now I have a son that's, grade 12, about to finish university, and this year he's been looking for a job, and he's been looking everywhere to find
Yeah,
a job. Because 'cause I'm like, "You need to go get a job. I'm not gonna be out here spending money." And he can't land one,
yeah,
and because now you've got all those first year you got all those university grads, I think, that we're starting to see going, no, they're going back to the restaurants, they're going back to the places
yeah,
because they can't get those entry level jobs. Now,
yeah.
I have no data to back that up, but I feel like I'm seeing early signs of that right now.
Well, yeah, and again, it's one of those things where it's the what's the terminology? Unintended consequences.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
unintended
Yeah.
consequences, but if you're a student of history, if you're a student of sort of social anthropology, if you will, right, and human psychology, then you can see that some of those key DNA characteristics don't change.
Yeah.
Right. We touched on the fact that the social component is almost directly correlated with longevity and happiness in later life. Right. Social
Yeah.
connection. Well, that as much as we are in contact with one another electronically, we're not really connected.
No,
Like
not
doing
truly.
right? There's a
Yeah.
place for it. Like I use Zoom as much as the next guy probably, but there is an appreciation for the fact that that is only one thing, and when
Mhm.
the depth and the value and the sitting down and the listening and the sharing, that has
Mhm.
something that as old as time has had value to the human condition that is
Mhm.
not going to go away with any kind of level of electronics or
Yeah.
technology.
Y you
Right?
know
But we don't elevate it. We don't actually celebrate it. We don't have reverence for it.
yeah. Here's my hope, and I think the we're a resilient bunch, and here's a couple things that do give me hope. The younger generations are actually stepping away from technology, and they're actually looking for experience. They're
Mhm.
looking for connection, and so I feel like they're recognizing that. I was also watching the news the other night, and they were talking about how there has been a massive surge in search and sales of tangible, real hobbies. People are like, for example, knitting.
Yeah,
Knitting is up
tactile.
like tactile stuff is now like Michael's is winning off of this. There
Mhm.
was like a 3,000% increase in search for yarn, right? Like
Yeah.
people are going, oh no, no, no. No, this isn't the long term. We've got to go back. So I feel like there is some self-correction that's happening, but but as parents, I also think we've got to get in the way of it for the sake of our own children.
Right. Well, it's very foundational. That's kind of where it all starts, right?
Mm,
The family, nuclear, foundational family unit, or whether it's chosen family or actual, like biological
mhm,
family, that plays a big part.
mhm,
I look back and both my parents are gone, but I look back and it's like that legacy and heritage, and I'm not talking about cultural heritage, just the foundational stuff. It is directly correlated. Now, and it's not all positive or negative, but even stuff that basically I shunned and pushed away against, there was something that was gained in the process of that, right?
mhm.
And so, we start off talking about, growing up well, right? Well,
Yeah.
it's funny because even if you have grown up well, we are now finding ourselves as a society, as people of a certain midlife phase, that we have another opportunity to actually now design our own growth of what when you look ahead. I'll ask you the question yourself. When you look ahead, what does growing up well mean to you personally now?
From here forward,
Yeah, and not as
am I
not as a
yeah.
CEO, but as a human being.
Yeah, I mean, it's shifted 100% from achievement and acquiring to shedding and curating what's meaningful. And honestly, it's not stuff, it's not material anymore. It's
Yeah.
experiential, it's connection, it's experiences with other humans that I love. It's
Mm,
people. That is what, if I look forward to the next 30, 40, maybe 50 years, that's where I want to focus my time. And God, I wish I'd known this in my, you know, 20s and teens and 30s when it was all about, the next achievement.
Yeah.
And, it's the and Arthur Brooks talks about it as well. It's the striver's curse, right? Like,
Yeah.
for people that are strivers in particular, we're always chasing that next hit,
Yeah.
right? That next win, that next big thing. But again, that's happiness. It's fleeting. It's not joy.
Right.
And eventually, and this is what's really interesting, is eventually we lose the ability to enjoy the things that aren't achievements because our body literally gets rewired. Our dopamine system gets rewired that we're chasing that next hit. And so I'm actually going through this right now where I'm like, damn it. I used to love just going out and going for a bike ride or going
Yeah.
fishing or what, zero value to my life in terms of what I'm going to achieve,
Yeah.
but being able to sit and find joy in that because I achieved for too many years and I lost that ability. So now I'm literally having to retrain my body to find peace and joy in those things that aren't achievements. And I think, you know, it's a conscious choice I have to make. And there's lots of modalities to help me do that. But a lot of people aren't in the position that I'm in where they've been exposed to all this. They don't even recognize what's happening.
Yeah. Well, I think, you could talk about that with uncertainty. I mean, I've used that in a couple of shows before, but I learned last year that one of the hardest things you could do, but once you get there, it is unbelievably rewarding, is to sit still.
Yeah.
To not confuse movement with progress.
Hmm.
Right. The word, I mean, the word hustle used to be something that you basically did to take advantage of somebody, and now all of a sudden it's something you wear on a t-shirt because
Yeah.
it prides you as a productive member of society, right? I mean, I mean, the word, and if you don't believe me, go look up in the dictionary, because the word
Sure.
hustle in that definition, which is the more modern definition, is one of the 5 or 6, and it's right at the bottom. There's other ones, like you used to hustle somebody at pool, you used to hustle somebody at, you know,
Sure.
so uncertainty was another one. Like, I learned about uncertainty and stillness very much from doing that, and that honestly, the only way around is through. You got to go through the crucible. You got to go through the chrysalis. You got to go through
Mhm.
the forge, and allow yourself to go through that. It requires courage. It requires
Yeah.
discipline, like you're talking about. You have to basically be clear on why you're doing it, and it's really for yourself. And there's
Mhm.
no just not only I disagree on the fact that it's not rewarding, because I think it is rewarding. It's just maybe not rewarding the way society wants to define rewarding.
Yeah.
Riding that bike or going fishing, right? Having that moment of stillness. It's interesting, and it's very empowering, I find. If you
Mhm.
get your head into that space, granted, you know, people say, well, financially you have to have this, and foundationally you have to have that, and all that. I disagree. I see people that are basically living life on a different level socioeconomically, and they have basically learned the difference between happiness and joy.
Yeah.
you know Looking at Arthur Brooks, and going back to like Second Mountain, and to talk about your thing where it's like basically the happiness is fleeting. How people, I know people that's like, the proverbial or metaphorical mountain that they climb, they just achieve
Mhm.
that peak, right? Whatever it is. And then
Mhm.
all they can do when they get to that peak is they are anxious and restless. All they can see is the next peak to get to.
Yeah.
They can't even sit still enough to enjoy the view,
Mhm.
or let alone, and Arthur Brooks talks about this in his book, where it's like there's a valley and the second mountain, right? And the
Mhm.
valley itself, which you could look at like, oh, it's the down in the valley versus up on the peak. The valley itself has so much value,
Yeah.
and not going through the valley, basically you lose some of that gained integration and wisdom that you then carry with you as you climb the second mountain.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know,
And in some cases, do you even need to climb the second mountain?
no, you may decide, no, I'm good with the valley.
Exactly, and that's
Because guess what?
okay.
When it rains, all the water comes down to me.
Yeah.
And
Much
I have an
much
irrigated
warmer,
river.
lusher, 100%. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So no, you don't, that's a great point, buddy. It's you don't
Yeah.
have to even go. You don't even have to go up to the second month. You may
Yeah,
decide, no, I'm good down here. I'm good. You know.
but that's what we've been tired. Oh, if there's a mountain, we gotta climb it, right? Like,
Right.
he who climbs the highest wins, and
And if you
that's
don't
just
climb it, then you're somehow non-productive. You're not
yeah.
reaching your potential. You're not living up to your potential. It's funny how we have taken out the value of some of these things that are so valuable. And here we
Mhm,
are at a point where whether it's individually part of our journey, uh, or we get to a point in life where we are given an opportunity to
mhm,
reconnect with that. And if you need
mhm,
the assistance to do that, there's Modern Elder Academy, right? The MEA's there. Talk to people around you. I equated my experience with MEA last year because I did the workshop in Santa Fe, and then
mhm.
I happened to be in Baja at the age of 60 to learn how to surf for the first time, right? And
Love
there
that.
happened to be a Corazon group that was meeting there. Shout out to
Mhm,
Leslie who led that one. And what I realized when I then was traveling is that if you're in that space in your life, if you're in that kind of phase, I won't even call it midlife, if that phase or that moment, you are basically looking at things from a different level of depth.
mm,
It's almost the equivalent of if I meet somebody that is not in that headspace or in that sort of metamorphosis, I'm having a conversation with them, and I'll use an architectural reference. I'm having a conversation with them at the porte cochere or the lobby of the hotel.
mhm,
And then eventually, with the small talk and whatever, we get to it a little maybe deeper, but we never really get past the mezzanine, maybe,
mm,
right? What I find with people that are in there, and I encountered it with people I didn't know in Baja, right? I encountered it with
mhm,
22 people that I never met before in Santa Fe.
mhm.
The conversations immediately went from that entry lobby to we're already talking at the fifth floor
Yeah,
within a week,
yeah,
right? Because everybody was there and open and willing and different levels of comfort and vulnerability, whatever. And so life offers us that opportunity, and in many cases understandably we don't really know. All we can feel is that stuckness that you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah.
And so where do I go? And so let's just, before we end, let's just let you basically proudly talk about MEA in terms of what's
Sure.
going on, what's happening, and what are some of the things that you're thinking of doing in your role now.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you'd asked me, 3 years ago if I'd be the CEO of a midlife wisdom school, I'd be like, "Huh? A what?" But
Laminated tables.
yeah, yeah, like, what the hell is that?
Yeah,
But, where MEA is going, honestly, when somebody asks me, "What are we trying to do?" Well, we're trying to create actually a pro-aging movement. Like, I wanna
yeah,
reframe aging from a negative to a positive,
right,
because it's got a bad rap, I mean, Becca Levy from Yale, just changing your mindset on aging from a negative to a positive can add 7 years to your life, right? Like, just that reframe, that's one of the things I want to preface this with. A lot of people might look at something like MEA and go, "Oh, is that just kind of woo woo?" Right? And especially guys, they're like, "What? I'm going to talk? No, no, no." Everything we do is actually based on social science. We've
yeah,
worked with some incredible academic institutions. And what we're trying to create here is a community of humans, relationships, people that can work together going through this thing called midlife, helping you guys navigate what that is, whether you're going through a transition or you're looking for purpose or you're looking for your next thing or working on identity or all of these different things that we've built programming around. And then also bringing in incredible thought leaders from around the world on midlife for people to interact with. And kind of what's unique about MEA is this isn't a workshop. This isn't a seminar. Okay. You don't come
yeah,
to a seminar. And I think we're super unique. I mean, there's other retreat centers out there, but a lot of the bigger ones that people are going to be familiar with, you could be there with 100 people, 200 people.
yeah.
MEA was specifically designed by Chip Conley, who is he used to be the second biggest boutique hotelier in the US. He was
Joie de vivre.
It was joie de vivre, that's right.
Yep.
And, so, when he saw this, he wanted to do something different, and so our retreat centers are designed as luxury boutique, small cohort-driven
Yep.
retreats, right?
Yep.
So, you're there with 25 to 30 people, and you're not sitting in an audience, you're participating. It's
Hmm.
experiential. Everything that we've built these to support an entire experiential week, whether it's on our 2,600-acre regenerative ranch in Santa Fe, where there's an equine experiences, horses, amazing place to do work in the high mountain desert, or down in Baja in our boutique resort just outside of
Right.
Todos Santos on the beach, right?
Yep.
But look, for anybody that's kind of in that midlife space, going, I feel stuck, I feel lost. I would encourage you to just come give it a try, because you're and what's really unique about this is you're doing this with a group of people. First of all, when you walk into that room, you don't know anybody, and I think that's a
Right.
benefit,
Hmm.
because there's no judgment. You're not sitting there, beside coworkers or family members or whatever. There's no judgments. Everybody's there for the same thing, and we create a container that allows people to do that work. And so, you know, I want to see us expand this. I want, midlife wisdom school. I want that term to be something that is just part of our vernacular as we hit
Hmm.
midlife. We're like, okay, this is where I go when I need some help with something like this. This is where I go and find other people in community that I can talk to that understand where I'm at. And, since we're on a podcast here, if you want to learn more about us, I mean, Chip's got his podcast, the Midlife Chrysalis, as well, with
Great
Chip
podcast, by
Conley.
the way. Yeah.
And him and I do an episode every Wednesday together, but then he's also got great guests. In fact, this week, Gavin Newsom was on the podcast.
Was
So
an amazing. It was that was an amazing interview. Yeah.
yeah, it
Encourage
was.
everybody to go check it out.
Yeah, it was a fantastic interview. Yeah, it's just it's something I believe in. It's given me purpose, for my next adventure, because I think it's something that's needed, and we're creating a positive change.
I think you touched on the fact that some people may look at this as woo woo. Well, I'll tell you from personal experience, and there's Derek and I, but my own personal experience is I echo everything that Derek's saying, and it's not like drinking the Kool Aid kind of like, 'cause some
Mm,
people go, well,
mhm.
what's this cult thing with in
Yeah.
Santa Fe, an hour from Albuquerque, and you're taking me down to Mexico, and what I really really appreciate the most, I think, about MEA, and it resonates with me because again, we're Gen Xers, right? Don't tell me what
Mhm.
to do, right? We have pretty strong identities, but
Mhm.
right. I said that what I really appreciate the most, honestly, is that you almost don't promise reinvention for
Mm-mm.
reinvention's sake. What you guys do, and I think once you get to a certain point individually, you try to project that and amplify that to people around you. I try to do that. Is that you're inviting people. You're inviting people into basically exploring this wisdom. There's no pressure, right? It's more of a at your pace. But if you're ready, we are saying, hey, dip your toe. You know, it's an invitation,
Mhm.
and it lines up completely with the hospitality background that Chip has. Like those campuses are an invitation to explore.
Mhm.
It are not the programs are not so tightly rigid that you basically feel like you're doing a to-do list.
Yeah.
The people that you bring on board to lead these uh we call them workshops for lack of a better word, but these gatherings
Mhm.
is are people that are in their own approach very inclusive, very engaging, very vulnerable even. I mean, shout out to Colonna, right? I mean,
Uh-huh.
him and Chip sitting there, I mean, I'm almost looking at any other one with that benchmark, right? I mean, it's you invite people to explore this phase of life
Mm.
through these safe confines and the joint community or camaraderie of other people on this journey. It's I'm walking beside you, right? You're walking beside me, even though you may
Mhm.
be ahead of me, because you're continuing your journey and you're inviting me to start mine or continue mine in my own way, to design it my own way. That is the thing that I appreciate the very most about MEA and how it is so different. Other than the setting not being in a conference room or whatever,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
settings are beautiful. I mean, those campuses are gorgeous. If for nothing else, I encourage people to basically check it out. And I think you guys are constantly developing the programming such so that
yeah.
it's more inviting for people to engage with too, right?
Oh, it's a constant evolution. Absolutely.
Right. So, so check out the website, guys, and check out Chip's podcast, especially this one with Gavin Newsom. I think what would be very surprising for a lot of people because
Mm,
it speaks to what we're talking about this comfortable exchange. And I know they basically have a background and connection and history, together, but uh, it allows us to communicate and connect on a human level that usually in today's modern society we don't get to exercise on a daily basis unless we seek it out. And I personally I'm seeking it out more and more at this phase of life through things like we just did today, which I mean, this has been such a powerful conversation and such grounded, honest, and deeply needed. I really want to thank you for taking
mm.
the time, Derek, to be here today.
Anytime, and thanks for having me, Rod.
Really. And I can't wait to see what you do because I'll just take the Gen X pride thing. You're sitting in that leadership position. I want to
Yeah.
I want to raise the Gen X flag and go woohoo! Look at what Derek's
I
doing,
love it.
right?
Love it.
And
Yeah.
and and I want to thank for those who are listening. This isn't about, like I said, this is not about retreating from life. Okay, it's about returning to it
Mhm.
with more clarity, courage, and care. And guess what? You can have somebody basically steward you through it, right? Or help you along that first step over the threshold of where you're stuck right now. Derek, thank you again for the work that you're doing. Thank you for joining me on the Rad Life. And to everyone else that's listening out there to this conversation, if it stirred something in you, don't rush past it. Take the time to sit with it. That's often where the next chapter really begins. And thank you for joining me again. And we'll see you on the
Thank
next
you.
episode of the Rad Life.